Scenarios in which you're going to want to change the needle on the machine. Such cases are, for instance, if you're changing from sewing a woven fabric to a knit fabric, we have ballpoint needles that you would use, and those are special because they are designed to not break through the knit stitch and cause snags and wrinkles in your fabric. Another scenario you would change the needle is if this one broke. You're going to take the screwdriver and just put it into the screw here, and then unscrew the needle. When you do this, you'll take the needle out and you'll notice some features of the needle. Here is a broken one that I can show you. This broken needle is quite obvious because it doesn't really look like a needle anymore. There are two sides of each needle. There's a round side and there's a flat side, which is more obvious from the top. The flat side always goes towards the wall. It goes to the back, and when you put it in properly and screw it in place, the eye hole of the needle should be lined up perfectly with you and the wall. In the case that you do not put the needle in correctly, or it's sideways, crooked, slanted, backwards, you're going to run into some problems where more than likely the needle will hit the presser foot or the feed here and break. So make sure every time you change the needle that the flat side is towards the back. There you go. The flat side also has some information on here. For instance, it might have the original sewing machine, like a Singer or Brother, and it might have the size of the needle. Okay, so let's talk about the presser foot. The presser foot is what pushes down on the fabric. In order to change the presser foot, we're going to press this lever here, the black one. When we press the lever, the presser foot just falls off easily. You'll notice on each presser foot is a letter. This one is the letter N, and this is actually the applique foot. You know which one you want to use for your project based on the stitch you're using. You can see up here on the dashboard which letter you should actually have. In this case, I want the letter J. The difference between these feet is mostly, you can notice there's a difference in the length here that the needle may go through. In the case that you have the wrong foot in, you could run into an issue where the needle actually hits the edge and breaks. In order to avoid needle breaking, please use the correct foot. You would use this foot, for instance, if you were going to use a decorative stitch like number 71. Here it tells you you want to use the N foot. But for my project, the J foot is okay. So now we're going to put this foot onto the machine. This works in the exact opposite way of removing a foot. We line this up with the little mouth here, and we're going to press down on the black lever and hold this up and let go of the lever. If you do it correctly, it should just hang on there. Now the last step is to take the thread and put it through this slot here and towards the back. And now we are ready to use this presser foot. That the sewing machine has been threaded on the top and the bottom thread has been brought up. And you know you have the correct presser foot for your project and that your stitch is on the correct stitch. And you have the correct needle in, your needle is threaded, everything is set. Now we're ready to sew. Now we are finally ready to sew because we have the correct presser foot, we have the correct needle for our project, the machine has been all threaded, top and bottom, and we have the stitch that we want to use at the correct length and width. Now we're going to put our project on. What we want to do is to get this underneath the presser foot. Sometimes you might have to press up on the lever in order to raise the presser foot and easily put your project in. If you're wondering how far to the left and right your fabric should be, you'll notice here that we have a grid and a ruler. The grid is in metric system and the ruler is in inches. For most projects, you're going to want to sew with a little less than 2 centimeters of seam allowance or 5/8 of an inch. We just line this up and make sure that the fabric is always along this line. In the case that you're worried that your hem is going to be very uneven, you can also choose to use this foot here. This foot, you'll notice, has a little arm here, which is designed to hold your fabric in place so that it doesn't wobble out of the way. When you have this, you'll find that your stitches are going to be perfectly straight and even. So now that I have my fabric lined up the way I want, I am going to lower the needle. I can either choose to use the dial or I can choose to use the needle button. I just press the needle button once and the needle is down. The next step is to lower the presser foot. We just take the lever here and pull it down. Now the presser foot is down. This is the order that you're going to do it most of the time. Needle first and then foot. Sometimes if you're doing a very narrow hem or using a very slippery fabric, you'll run into a problem where putting the needle down actually sucks the fabric down into the bottom bobbin area. In that case, you're going to put the presser foot down first to secure the fabric. But the advantage to putting the needle down first is that I know that my needle is going to go exactly where I need it to go in the straight line. If you want to make sure that your stitches are perfectly straight, you could use a piece of tailor's chalk and use the tailor's chalk to mark where you're going to sew. We have tailor's chalk in red, yellow, blue, and white, and you would just take it and rub it against your fabric to make a line. Because this is chalk, it does wash off very easily. So,
please put the chalk back.
As a reminder, we cannot tie a knot when we are sewing with a sewing machine. So in order to secure our fabric, we actually have to reverse over the stitches we're going to sew. So in that case, I'm going to hold down the reverse button. Holding down the reverse button does send the machine slowly backwards. And if you want to speed it up, you can have your machine going at a higher speed and just lightly press down on the presser foot here, the pedal, just to make sure that the machine is going as fast as you want. So first, let me show you its default speed. Now I'm going to go a little faster. Okay, so now that I've reversed, I can start to go forward. When I'm going forward, you'll see I just went exactly over the stitches I just sewed. Now the thread is secure and it won't unravel. And now we just sew forward on our project. You're always going to want to sew at the fastest speed possible that you can handle, because the faster you sew, the straighter your stitches are actually going to be. If you sew too slow, you might run into a problem where your stitches are really wobbly because you're moving the fabric too much. So I need to turn my fabric in order to sew this corner. So in order to turn the fabric, I just lift the presser foot up. Make sure that the needle is still in place and pivot in the direction that you want to sew. Now you can just sew forward. You'll You'll notice in order to sew a curve, I'm just lightly pushing the fabric in the direction that I want it. And again, because of there are feed dogs underneath here, which when I pick up your fabric, you'll see them. And the feed dogs are what are moving the fabric forward, so I don't actually need to push manually. And now I'm going to sew to the edge of my project, slowly so I can watch it. And now that I'm at the end, I have to secure my thread on the other side too. So let's just push down on the reverse button. A few stitches and then go back forward a few stitches. Now I'm done. So all I have to do is pick up the presser foot, pick up the needle, and gently pull my project out. Now the last step, just come to the side here to use the blade and snip it off. Now your first project is finished. One more feature I mentioned, here are the feed dogs. They're these little jagged things here. The feed dogs are what move the fabric forward. There are some scenarios in which you might need to turn these little feed dogs off. For instance, if you're sewing a slippery stitch and the feed dogs keep bunching up your fabric, there is a button somewhere in the back here that will allow you to turn the feed dogs off so you can manually move your fabric forward. But for the most part, you're just going to leave the dogs on and they'll pull the fabric forward for you. So all you need your hand to do is guide your fabric and not push it. Lastly, if you have more questions or want some more specific information, this is all in the operation manual. The operation manual is very specific and helpful. For instance, there's information in here like what needle you should use for what kind of fabric. And then in the back, the appendices explains all of the possible error messages that you'll get. If you have any questions about sewing, or if you run into any snags or problems, or you might think that the machine might be broken, don't worry. All you have to do is contact the sewing room. In that case, you will not be in trouble because you did report the problem, so do not hesitate to report any issues you have.